think you should be silent now when you look.
All right, Grandpa here is, as I call myself now with the bi folks on, is presented with John Smith Common Law Part 2 through the observation deck. And just quickly thumbing through it, I've already made a video previous to Part 1 to, start to discover where we are at fault as opposed to pointing fingers at somebody else being at fault. And that's what I had to learn, that I was always going and pointing my finger at the establishment, at judges and cops and yada yada. And until I came to realize that I didn't even really comprehend law. I understood law to the extent of what I was furnished based on other freemen and sovereigns doing commercial redemption processes, or doing A for V's, or that's part of the redemption or commercial redemption process, but also investigating equity and thinking that is the Hail Mary to determine your freedoms and such. That I was still at that time remained open enough to not to confine myself to belief, to allow entry of someone who knew or who was discovering what law was. And by listening to that, I realized I didn't even know what law was. And so I'm out there, coming out to the courts with guns a-blazing when I really had no bullets or no gun, essentially. Okay, and my power was empty. And then I received the repercussions of the effect of that, and it only came to my realization that until I take 100% responsibility in coming to grips of what exactly I am doing through my own comprehension of what law is, then I'm always going to be my own victim, essentially slapping myself in the face. So as I now start looking, as I realize that there's a part 2 to the series, I going a little bit through it haphazardly, because again, I've already made mention of what my thoughts were on part 1 that sort of set the groundwork. But at 8 minutes in, the facilitator of this meeting, who is commanding the organization observation deck, is making reference to that we were never privy to the contract to consent to it, whereby we became enslaved to their system. And essentially they take the birth certificate and they control the life value of that birth certificate and give us the equitable value. Well, it's time to clear that up a bit, because we're always automatically thinking that everything that happens is against us and the life. But that is a misnomer. What is essentially, it's not even essentially, it is absolutely happening, is English law only deals with estate rights in land. So rights that are annexed to the land for its use. Because everyone is a tenant, whether you're a subject or a citizen. Everyone is is a tenant in English law. No one has a lodium title. It doesn't exist in English law, okay? So everyone's a tenant. The point that you need to ask to come to grips with is, what status are you using while you are a tenant, okay? So if English law only deals with the rights to land, therefore those rights are set against in an agreement. That agreement then is noticed to your status and what to hold or speak to that agreement in order to get specific performance or to get remedy within. So if you're coming in to a court, the court then is relegated to only look to the agreement, and that agreement again is annexed to land, and as such, now you are relegated to well, you're measured against an obligation because it is obvious you are bringing a matter that the court can only deal with by securing that agreement and seeing what that agreement is. So there is no slavery. I mean, actually, slavery is abhorrent to English law. And so is involuntary servitude. It is not happening. No one is enforcing their will upon you. No one is. You are just, through your own inability to understand what agreements you are involved in, then creates an obligation that the court is looking to you to fulfill based on someone bringing that matter to court for a determination. That it's essentially asking, well, does this party have, is this, first of all, is this the right party in order to deal with this? And in most cases, everybody's going to answer yes just by the words and accepting the name without qualification. But then once the parties are dealt with, the court, the judge then secures that agreement so to make sure that remedy is afforded to that person who is been harmed, in as much as harmed is a commercial transaction, not as a harm that is done between a physical being with another physical being. That's not the problem within the general civil matters that are happening in these courts. What is happening is, it's like, how's this? It's like a landlord and tenant. Well, if the tenant doesn't pay his rent, does anyone get harmed? Okay? Does anyone get physically harmed? So think about that each time you walk into court. The court is securing the agreement and first by making sure that the parties are present in order to meet the requirements of that obligation that needs to be fulfilled. And when that obligation is not fulfilled, then the court's there just to make, just to adjudicate over that matter, make a determination who's at fault. Did the tenant pay his rent on time, or he didn't pay his rent this time? Or is the landlord being, doing things overreaching the initial agreement, such as, you pay me so much a month, and all of a sudden next month he's saying, well, you owe me an extra $20, and you're going, what? Well, how come I'm, here's our agreement. You asked for this, and now you're asking for an extra $20. See how that then nothing can move forward until it's brought before a court, and a court's only making a determination based on that issue, which is annexed to that agreement. It has nothing to do with you as a living man or woman. So as a citizen, what agreements are you making? There is no slavery. Again, it's abhorrent to English law. You essentially are enslaving yourself. Always have, always will, until you come to some sort of comprehension of what law is, thereby dealing with that interest that best suits you, which is essentially not being relegated to those matters that are subject to legislative authority. Okay, legislative authority, here's the actual beauty of all law. Legislation, the monarchy, the Pope, any agency, ministers, they're all under oath, under confinement of certain prohibitions and limitations. They can't go past that. You, who do not have an oath, have all the power to which then to affect that oath, if it is within that title's duties and powers to then fulfill whatever it is that you're asking. You only have a power, but you only have a power when you're not then measured against agreement. And if you're measured against agreement, then you have an obligation. Therefore, now you have prohibitions and limitations within that agreement to fulfill. So I just stopped at 8 minutes to just touch on that. John Smith is an agreement with the man who's hosting the show of Observation Deck, and there is, I say, the quintessential point, the 0 point here, where they're going to continue to go astray in dealing with what they think is noble and admirable, and speaking to matters of man and woman and the common law courts. Well, you're not doing anything except creating another distortion that somewhere along the line, being that courts now have security under the Judicature Acts, they're going to bring your ass back into equity, and which is a commercial redemption process, or not commercial redemption, but it is a measurement against a use of land that then creates an obligation for you to perform, and they're going to say, are you that correct party that's supposed to perform that agreement? And they're going to find out that you are, by your own inability to speak to the matter at hand, because in most cases you guys are not going to use a lawyer, and who's the only one that's going to speak and properly navigate the courts and procedures and the interest that's being actually heard. And you're going to be run over again as soon as the court catches up with dealing with your common law court issues that you're making orders upon, and trying to address those orders within the public. You're creating another battle, which is not necessary. And why it's not necessary? Because you do not need to deal with Parliament. There is no contract of trust with Parliament. It doesn't exist. The trust agreement is with the right to administrate over the second level of use to land in equity, to account for the waste that's used while the government is essentially acting as proprietorship to use that land, and using citizens as the worker bees, if you will, as quasi-trustees to take care of that interest and pay for the waste that they're creating. So stop being a citizen. Stop coming under the umbrella of government, and stop arguing with government. There is no argument. If you really want truly common law, then deal with common law, which is the English common law, not the common law in each territory, because it's still administered through Parliament. Deal with the English common law, because through the Act of Settlement 1700, that is your birthright, and you have not yet to affect that, which is evident by the very fact you are a citizen and trying to dealing with common law under Parliament. It's an oxymoron. Okay, so just the point is, you have the power when you come to terms of what that power is, and that is noticing what the agreements you are inadvertently accepting by voluntarily, waking up each day, going to work, getting a driver license, being a citizen, acquiring property through mortgage titles, which is another interest in itself, and and then coming in saying you want rights under the common law as a physical being. Okay, you're just commingling things, and the judge is going to throw your ass under called a constructive trust, and because you don't understand the trust that you're under, and you're going to be, sooner or later they're going to quash you or not listen to you. You can be ignored. Okay, so that's all I want to say. That's just 8 minutes in. I don't need to go through the rest of the video to start critiquing anything. I think we've got the gist based on the video I just did on part 1. This is, this will just help to, to facilitate the discussion necessary to really define where we are going wrong, instead of looking to the system of where they're going wrong. It's the system. It's just going to go the way that it needs to go, because that's the way it was designed. And with that, thank you for listening.